forgiveness.
3,
In the hills of love.
5, 6, 7,
On the sea of love.
9.
Love's gonna get you, baby.
So thank you very much for joining us. So nice to see so many people here today. I'm very happy to be here. This is a very important date for me for many reasons. And it's an important date to the world for many reasons. It's the anniversary of Elvis Presley's death, and a lot of things are celebrated on this day. So I do want to acknowledge Mr. Presley. But it's the anniversary of me arriving in San Francisco 41 years ago in 1979. And I came here never having visited even, but I came to move here. I had 2 suitcases and a backpack, and it was a very momentous thing because I'd actually never been on an airplane before. So I flew here to move here, never having visited here, with 2 suitcases and a backpack and with $2,000. I thought that was going to be more than enough to set me up in San Francisco. It's also the anniversary of a spiritually significant thing called the Harmonic Convergence, which was held in 1987. And that was a very significant thing for the Community Miracle Center because we took part in that. And I've talked about that in other years, so I'm not going to get into that too much today, but the Harmonic Convergence was on August 16th, and I moved to San Francisco on August 16th. So the title of my talk today is Be Not Afraid. And be not afraid is a very significant phrase. So the phrase be not afraid, or some derivation of it, maybe just fear not, is actually the most common phrase in the Bible. It is the thing that Jesus is quoted as saying more than anything else that he said in the Bible. And there are varying counts of how many times it is said, but one source I looked at today said it's said 103 times. So 103 times in the Bible, Jesus says, or others say, fear not, or be not afraid. So it's a very, very important thing. And we are living through a time, and I see a lot on social media and in the discussion that there's a lot of fear out there in the world, and there's a lot of what I would call fear mongering. So there's a lot of people who are speaking words of fear and who seem to have a vested interest in making people afraid or keeping people afraid. So a monger is a person who promotes a specified activity, situation, or feeling, especially one that is undesirable. So when somebody is a fear monger, they're promoting fear, and they're promoting a fearful situation or a feeling. And nobody wants to be fearful. It's definitely undesirable. So why do people do this? Well, they do it to manipulate behavior. They feel if they can make people afraid, then they can control their behavior. And we all do this at different times, and I see it's going on in the society a lot. Okay, so it's going on with the pandemic. You hear people say, yeah, you don't like wearing a mask? You're really going to hate being on a ventilator. So they say things like that. So, okay, yeah, of course, we would all really, really hate being on a ventilator. But do we need to put that out there? Do we need to put that image in people's minds? So not only do they say things like that, then they show diagrams on Facebook of what it's like and the tubes down your throat and into your lungs and what it's like being on a ventilator. And then they show people on, a ventilator, and people who are on ventilators are, like half conscious or kept unconscious. It's a pretty awful thing being on a ventilator. So, I'm just looking at that. And we do this with a lot of things. And we do it to make people afraid. And I think we, as Course in Miracles students, could challenge that. And I certainly don't want to do that. I want to make people hopeful. I post hopeful things and hopeful links. And I try to challenge the fear at a variety of levels. I sometimes challenge it at a worldly level, and I sometimes challenge it at a more lofty level. This seems to confuse people a lot. I get attacked for it a fair amount of the time. But I know what I'm doing. I am just trying to put out a message of hope and joy and freedom. And many people still, though, want to protect their fearful perception of things, and so they challenge me on it, and sometimes out and out attack me on it. Okay, so when we put out fearful messages, yes, we can find fearful things to talk about. And A Course in Miracles has a couple of passages that, if you're a Course in Miracles student, you've encountered these passages, and they're talked about a lot. And it talks about the messengers of fear that we send out there to go find fearful images in the world to then bring back to us. And it says, fear's messengers steal guiltily away in hungry search of guilt, for they are kept cold and starving and made very vicious by their master, who allows them to feast only upon what they return to him. No little shred of guilt escapes their hungry eyes, and in their savage search for sin, they pounce on any living thing they see and carry it screaming to their master to be devoured. So, these are pretty graphic images for A Course in Miracles, but this is what we do when we fear monger. If we are bringing forward fearful messages and then fearful imagery for people to look at and get afraid so that it might manipulate their behavior, that's exactly what we're doing. A little later it says, send not these savage messengers into the world to feast upon it and prey upon reality, for they will bring you word of bones and skin and flesh. They have been taught to seek for the corruptible and to return with gorges filled with things decayed and rotted. So yeah, we send out fear's messengers. We'll see fearful things. And then if we put these fearful things for other people to see, that's what will happen. And it will make people fearful and guilty. And do we really want to do that? Or it will help people choose fear and guilt for themselves. Do we really want to do that? I know that I, as a Course in Miracles student, I want to spread words of hope and peace and strength and bliss. I want to be able to say, woohoo, woohoo, look at this, isn't this great, woohoo. 6 of us went out to dinner last Friday night at a restaurant outside, and it was great, woohoo, that was wonderful, that was hopeful and peaceful, and I felt strong and blissful. Course in Miracles says, and this was in the reading that Reverend Peter read, it says, make no one fearful, for his guilt is yours. Make no one fearful, for his guilt is yours. That's a very interesting passage. For one, it's equating fear and guilt. It doesn't say, make no one fearful, for his fear is yours. It says, make no one fearful, for his guilt is yours, because it must be that guilt and fear are exactly the same thing. Remember the Bible, fear not, be not afraid. The most common thing that is said in the Bible. Course in Miracles, still the same message. Don't be afraid. And certainly don't work at making anybody else afraid. Jesus tells us in A Course in Miracles, in this world, you need not have tribulations, which are things that you worry about, are afraid about, because I have overcome the world. So we're supposed to use Jesus as a model, as an example of somebody who has overcome the world. And if he can do it, we can do it. We do not have to buy into the fear that we can see in the world if we send out fear's messengers, but we have to stop sending out fear's messengers. A Course in Miracles says that right below this level of perception that we have, there is a solid, seemingly solid level of fear. And I think the whole pandemic has just really exposed that. And that's, that's a good thing, actually. It's a good thing to have it be exposed. Course says, you are severely tempted to abandon Holy Spirit at the outside ring of fear, and he would lead you safely through and far beyond. Reverend Peter read that one too. So, when A Course in Miracles tells me we're going to be severely tempted, I think we should take notice. It means we're going to be severely tempted. So I understand people giving in to the fear because it's a severe temptation. But the Holy Spirit is going to lead us through that and far beyond. So we got to stay connected to our guidance so that we walk through that fear. A Course in Miracles, in the very next paragraph says, the circle of fear lies just below the level the body sees and seems to be the whole foundation on which the world is based. And, we're seeing that. The whole foundation that this perceptual world is based on is this circle of fear. But the Holy Spirit is going to lead us through that. But we have to be able to follow the Holy Spirit through the seeming terror, and there's going to be a severe temptation to let go of the guidance and start reacting defensively to the fear. And one of the ways that we do that then is to share the fear, which is the fear mongering that goes on a lot and that I think we need to just be aware of and make sure that we're not doing. Fear is a problem. Fear is a problem. Fear is the basis for all the problems of the world. Fear and guilt, the same thing. The Course tells us the last thing that can help the non-right-minded or the sick is an increase in fear. They are already in a fear-weakened state. So it's the fear that caused the sickness in the first place. So sick people are in a fear-weakened state, and we certainly don't want to make them more afraid. So the whole world is in a sickness right now. COVID-19, it's in a fear-weakened state. We certainly don't want to make the world any more fearful. Remember what the Course said that I've already quoted. Make no one fearful, for his guilt is yours. We will feel guilty if we do it, and we will just feel more fearful if we do it ourselves. Find something to say woohoo about. Find some joy to share. Maybe they won't agree with the thing that you're choosing, but hopefully they'll be able to tap into your joy and to your exuberance and to your bliss and to your peace and to your strength and to your hope. And they'll be able to instill that into themselves, and then they will be able to heal. There's an oath that doctors take. It's usually called the Hippocratic Oath. And one of the lines in that oath is, above all, do no harm. Now, that line, above all, do no harm, wasn't actually in the original Hippocratic Oath. It's actually something that was put into it a couple of centuries ago. But, it's maybe the most famous line in the oath, above all, do no harm. Because, it was realized that doctors and people in the medical profession were practicing things that sometimes did more harm to the people than they solved. And I talked about this a couple of weeks ago. For centuries, one of the main things that doctors did was bloodletting. They'd come over with a big basin, and then they'd cut your arteries and your veins, and you would bleed a certain amount. And it was thought that, these things called humors, and you had to balance them, and there were basically poisons in your blood. So drain them out, and then you could produce new blood with less poison in it. It makes logical sense. I could see why that seemed to be a thing that people probably thought would heal them. But now we see that as a pretty barbaric procedure, and, people don't do bloodletting anymore. But I think of some of the things that we still do. We bombard people with cancer with deadly radiation. We give them poisons because we believe these poisons will kill the cancer cells faster than they'll kill the other cells. So, I mean, these are pretty drastic behaviors. And, I think there'll come a time when we'll probably think that those are pretty barbaric. So, above all, do no harm. And I think we need to understand that perpetuating fear and being a fear monger is doing harm. So, above all, don't do it. Don't scare people to manipulate their behavior. If you feel strongly about something, present the strong, logical, rational case why it's a good thing to do. And fear is never going to help you present that case. So what's the A Course in Miracles procedure really for healing? It's really very simple. Recognize the misperception, offer it up to the Holy Spirit, ask for guidance, and then embrace that guidance when you receive it. Okay, let me repeat. Recognize the misperception, offer that misperception up to the Holy Spirit, ask for guidance about it, and then embrace that guidance when you receive it. I don't think that's going to do anybody any harm. So in terms of, above all, do no harm, I think that's a pretty good foundation for us, A Course in Miracles, to be sitting at. So I've asked A Course in Miracles, I've asked the Holy Spirit to give me, a new perception about what's going on. What's something positive going on here with our society and the world. And what I keep getting, it's been a little hard for me to express this, but I think it's uncovering the unacceptableness of sickness and death for everybody. Everybody just looks at that and sees that and knows it's unacceptable. And of course, they don't want it. And I see them, working to not have it, and okay, they're doing the best they can, and I can bless that. But I think we, Course in Miracles students, can offer them something a little better, a better approach, at least to those who are willing to hear it, because much of the approach that people choose, I think, is kind of like bloodletting and radiation therapy and poisonous chemotherapy. They're things that actually end up doing more harm. And above all, do no harm. And the Course in Miracles way of approaching these things doesn't do any harm. And that's what I want to promote. So I think people are really seeing that it's just not acceptable to be sick and debilitated and then dying. That dying doesn't have to be like that. In the Song of Prayer, it talks about a different way to leave the plane. And then it talks about, the usual way at the end of a sickness says, and then it says, it does not come because of hurtful thoughts and raging anger at the universe. So we get sick because we've had hurtful thoughts and we're attacking the universe and we believe we're part of this universe. So that attack manifests in our body. So it does not come because of hurtful thoughts and raging anger at the universe. It does not come in forms that seem thrust down in pain upon unwilling flesh. So leaving this plane, what we might call dying, does not have to come in forms that seem to be thrust down in pain upon unwilling flesh. And I think that's what people really know intuitively, and that's why they're reacting so strongly to this COVID-19 disease. They're rejecting it at a certain level, and I think that's actually a very, very good thing. And I think we have a responsibility to give them a way to effectively reject it that doesn't end up doing more harm than the COVID-19 disease might be doing. And that's our real woohoo message. And I am willing to give that message in every way I can. Course in Miracles says you are not meant to suffer and to die. Your Father wills these dreams be gone. Let truth correct them all. You are not meant to suffer and to die. Your Father wills these dreams be gone. That's the message I want to give to people. I do not want to be a fear monger. Now, I understand that this is the way the world is set up. This is our society. I read this week that the National Institute of Health, the NIH, is now doing a study on what will be the most effective way to convince people to take a COVID-19 vaccine when it comes, because they know that there's a huge resistance right now that is growing to taking a vaccine. And they also know from their thought system that they have to get a large percentage of the population to take this vaccine or it won't be effective. So they've listed all these arguments that they're thinking about using, and they're going to test them. And one of the arguments is, how well will guilt and shame work? So they're going to test the idea that, how about you don't get the vaccine and then you contract the virus, and well, you don't get really sick, but you bring it back home and then you give it to your parents or your grandparents and they die. How are you going to feel then? And that was exactly how it was worded. They're going to test that, like test marketing, to see if that will get people to be compliant and get a vaccine. Okay, I understand from their point of view. They're not, they're doing the best they can. They want people to take a vaccine. But, above all, do no harm. Don't be a fear monger. Don't be a guilt monger. It's never going to help anybody to make anybody guilty. Make a great case for the vaccine. Talk about how effective the vaccine is. Make sure it is effective. Talk about how safe the vaccine is. Make sure it is safe. Make a great case for the vaccine. That's the way to get more people to take it. Make people feel guilty and ashamed if they don't take it. That's fear mongering. That's guilt mongering. I don't want to be any part of that. But when you start hearing that, know where it came from. It came from governmental agencies trying to figure out what's the most effective way to manipulate everybody. That's not a woohoo message. That's not the message that I want to give. Now, I think there's a lot of great woohoo things going on. I got a great woohoo yesterday. Maybe people won't agree with me, but I thought this was a great message of hope. It happened Friday, actually. There's a large mega church in LA. It's called Grace Community Church, and they were meeting inside, and then there was a court order to stop them meeting inside. They fought the court order, and on Friday, the judge told that they gave them a stay, and they told them that they could meet inside as long as they practiced social distancing and wearing masks. And the pastor, his name is John MacArthur, agreed to that and thanked everybody. So today, right now, Grace Community Church is meeting indoors, social distancing, wearing masks. And I think for me, that's a woohoo movement. They're as essential services of everything else. If I can go into Costco with a mask and practicing social distancing, which doesn't work all that well in Costco, a church that can probably practice social distancing and mask wearing better than Costco can, they certainly should be able to meet as well. And I'm happy. I'm happy about that. I'm happy for religious freedom. I'm happy that the First Amendment is being recognized. The First Amendment says Congress shall make no laws respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or the right to people to peaceably assemble. So woohoo, woohoo for Grace Community Church, that you're meeting, social distancing, mask, but you're giving people the right to practice their religion. And if I have the right to go to the bank, and if I have the right to go to Safeway under those conditions, I believe church is even much more of an essential service than that. So, yay. So, don't fear monger. If you've got a case to present it positively. Really present it positively, and then accept that not everybody's going to agree with you. Because as I said the last time, the right wing and the left wing, they still fly the same bird. Everybody's got an opinion, and not everybody's going to agree with you. But there's a really great thing going on in our culture right now. And that thing is we're questioning the necessity of sickness and death the way that it appears. And we, A Course in Miracles students, don't want anybody to be afraid and don't want anybody to have more fear. So we're going to spread woohoo messages of hope and joy and peace and bliss and give people really something that not only does no harm, but actually does a tremendous amount of healing and good. Okay, that's my talk for today. Thank you very much.
How beautiful you are. How beautiful you are. All my forbidden fruits, got to keep on feeding like a dog in a cage. And now you lie here like honey in the palm of my hand.